Hi everyone. Please come back and join us. We're gonna get going again. Give a few people a few seconds to trickle back in. So thank you all again for coming today and being here this morning. We're going to start back up with our youth panel that we have, which is the activity taking place between now and lunch. So don't worry, you have lunch to look forward to. But before that, you have this wonderful panel to look forward to. I'm going to very quickly introduce myself. My name is Jehan Casey. As Krista mentioned, I'm from the Haida community. Skidegate First Nation actually is where my father and my nanai are. And I am so excited to join the First Nations Public Service Secretariat. As Krista indicated, I am currently between a couple of roles. I'm still doing my old job and a little bit of my new job in Washington, D.C., but I worked very briefly at the First Nations Education Steering Committee. I then worked for what was then INAC and then ANSI. I managed communications there, and I worked in the funding services area in BC region. And I'm now working for the Government of Canada at our embassy in Washington, D.C., and happy to be coming back here. And I'm just going to indulge me for another 30 seconds. I just want to say, Krista introduced Selena Dorme. What she didn't mention is Krista, she said, has been part-time. I have been flying in and out. Selena has basically been the rock that has done everything and put this entire thing together. So I just wanted to say a personal thank you on behalf of Krista and everyone here to Selena for basically making us be here today and for everything happening. So if you have a moment, go say thank you to Selena for us. And that's the last of my thank yous about us. Like Krista mentioned, when the FNPSS came about years ago, when it was first established, there was a conference held, and some of the feedback remarked on how important the youth presence and the youth comments were. And one of the keys was that it should be brought up earlier in the conference, that it needs to be given prominence, and that voice needed to be something that everyone heard and could carry through their thoughts and the work that they were doing over the rest of the 2 days. So that's part of why we moved it up in our agenda. And we're happy to have these four wonderful people here now. I wanted to say a couple of things from the report that came out of that conference that spoke to me, and for me as I think something that we're carrying through on the importance of having youth involved. And I'm going to quote directly actually from a panelist at that conference. Youth dance the dance of two worlds. And this is panelist Teresa Morris at that conference. They want to learn about their histories and stories from their elders, but also offer fresh and modern capabilities. And I think that is absolutely a brilliant way of describing where youth sit in their communities, in being wanting to know about the old ways and being so part of the new ways, and the importance of being able to bring those all together is absolutely key. So as the reporter from the 2012 conference said, in this way, youth are the link between a First Nations past and its future. So beyond that, I'm not going to say much more because you really don't want to hear much from me. I'm going to introduce our panelists here and then let them speak, and we'll have a dialogue as we go forward. So very quickly, down at the far end of the table is Timothy Masso. Some of you may have heard him before. He was at the joint gathering very recently. He is Nuu-chulnith from the Tloquit First Nation. And Timmy has become an advocate for First Nations languages since he was in grade 6, which seems like it was so long ago. He's in grade 9, I understand now, at Ucluelet Secondary School. So in November 2016, he spoke to Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs Canada, about the fact that he was teaching his grade 8 Newfoundland language class. In 2017, the First Nations Education Steering Committee recognized him as a language champion of BC. So as I said, he's now attending Ucluelet Secondary School, and he's also enrolled full-time at the University of Victoria, which I think is absolutely amazing, in their language revitalization program. And as we go down the table here, I have to see who's sitting on that side. Karen. Karen is from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation here in North Vancouver. She graduated with a BA in Honors in Archaeology from Simon Fraser University in June 2017 and is currently enrolled in a Master's Anthropology program at the University of British Columbia. Her research seeks to examine trade relationships and the continuity of ritual in the archaeological record of the Salish Sea region, and I hope she will explain more about what that means, using geochemical analysis and collaborative ethnography. Eventually, after some work experience within her community, her long game goal is to be a professor so that she can shape the future of Indigenous archaeology. And next to Karen, we have Megan Southflat. So Megan, and Megan has actually coached me on this, and I'm still going to get it wrong. I'm so sorry. Megan is a member of the Opaskwayak. So I practiced, and that's as good as I got. Cree Nation. And she is a descendant of the Vutnet Gwich'in. Oh, I'm just doing a horrible job of the Yukon. I'll let Megan fix that. She's also Métis, Red River Métis. That one I can pronounce. She graduated from Simon Fraser University in 2016 with a BA in Archaeology and a certificate in Cultural Resource Management. She's currently attending the British Columbia Institute of Technology part-time, and she's working towards the Geographic Information Systems program. And sitting closest to me here is Tia Marie Felix. So Tia is currently completing her practicum with Birth and Beyond Midwifery Clinic at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Tia was a midwifery student at Strathcona Midwifery Collective, Urban Native Youth Association, as well as Mighty Oak and Kamloops. As a future Indigenous midwife, she hopes to provide well women and reproductive care in rural and remote settings, such as reserves, like the one she was raised in. In her role as an Indigenous midwife for the people, Tia is determined to continue to expand her knowledge, skill set, and address the unique needs, both mentally and physically, of future families. She is a birth and postpartum doula, title and rights researcher, a sister to 7 siblings, and I thought I had a big family, and an active member of the Splatson community. So thank you all for being here. And as I said, you don't want to hear from me, so I'm going to ask each of them to speak a little bit about their own experiences and provide some introductory comments, and we'll go from there. So we might as well start down at the end of the table. Tim, can you please tell us a little bit about your story?
Utlasish Timothy Masu, Histakshit Tlaokwet, Haid Utlutlat, Nuiaksu Trent Masu, Uish Iaksu Jesse Masu, Naniaksu Mit Alec and Nancy Masu, Naniaksu Wayne and Jennifer Winstop. Hello everybody, my name is Timothy Masu. I'm from Tlaokwet, but I live in Utlutlat territory. My parents are Trent and Jesse Masu. My late grandparents on my dad's side are Alec and Nancy Masu. My grandparents are still with us, are Wayne and Jennifer Winstop. I first got into language about 5 years ago when my brother Yomer Winstop had a brain operation. He was attending UVic at the time, and every couple weeks it would get really hard for him, and he would get really depressed, and the elders there would brush him down with cedar boughs and sing him a prayer. And I could see the strength that this gave Yomer. And they taught me a prayer so I could sing it to him when they weren't there. And once Yomer started getting better, I returned home, and I was so excited to learn my language. And at school they had a language class, and so I signed up for it. And when I got there, it was a spare block. We didn't learn our language, and I was so discouraged. And then about probably 2 weeks later, this course came up through UVic, and my mom signed me up for it. And that course was on writing and reading the Nujant language. And the following year, there was another course that was on speaking the language and translating it. Once I got to grade 8, again there was another language class, and it was a accredited second language, so you can go to university. And I I thought they were going to have the class again. But again, when I got there, it was a spare block. But this time I decided that I should try to change this one. And so I asked my teacher if I could teach the class, and he said yes. So about a week later, I started teaching the class, and I had all the papers from the courses that I took. But when I got there, I found out that the kids didn't know the alphabets or the sound of the language. So I had to find a new way to teach this class. So I came up with this idea of language blocks. And so you're able to interact with the language and feel it. And all the kids that I was teaching all learned way faster this way because they could learn root words and then just build a huge sentence instantly. And then about in November of 2016, my brother Yelmer Wenstab was stepping down from his position as the AFN youth rep. And he was, me and my mother and I went to support Yelmer while he was doing this. While we were there, Carolyn Bennett got up and spoke of how they're bringing back the language, and I was so upset. And so I asked for time so I could speak, and I got up and I said that we're not learning our language. We're losing it really fast. We have to get it back soon. And I said that I was teaching the course, or teaching the class at my school. And after she came up and said she needed my help and I needed to be an advocate for my language. So I went home and I wrote down all my concerns, and I came up with 4 calls to action. I sent them to all the Nuu-chah nations, Carolyn Bennett, the school board, anyone I could think of. And in February of 2017, I stepped aside from school to fight for my language. And so from February till now, I've gone to about over 70 meetings fighting for my language. And in September of this year, thank you very much, September, I went back to school because I thought I was falling behind on my academic courses. And when I got there, the school board thanked me for all I'm doing, and they hired a linguist and an elder for the school, they're also writing a curriculum. And in January, the course came up that was put on by UVic again, and it was a 2-year-long language revitalization course. And so I signed up for it. And as I look back on my story, I thought I was all alone, all by myself, but there's people in my community and across Canada that's been fighting for language for a long time. And we're all paddling together. We can make it through any storm. Chew.
Thank you so much, Timothy.
That's hard to follow up. I have like a fortuitous story. How I found archaeology. I had been out of high school for 6 years, and I was working at Starbucks, and I got a random phone call from a relative of mine who worked for our Treaty Lands and Resources Department, and she said, "Hey, are you busy tomorrow? Do you have steel-toed boots?" And I said, "No, I'm not busy tomorrow. I have Wednesday off, a random day off in the middle of the week, but I don't have boots and I have really big feet." So she's like, "Come and get this check for $50 and try and find some boots that fit and meet at the SkyTrain station tomorrow at 7, and the archaeologists will pick you up." So I went and picked up the check, and I went to Mark's Work Warehouse, and there was a pair of size 11 women's steel-toed boots for $49.95. And I said, "Well, I think this is a sign." And I showed up, and I ended up filling a seat in a training, like a safety orientation for the South Fraser Perimeter Road project. Some of you might be familiar. It runs along the south arm of the Fraser. It's a transportation corridor, and it impacts some of the largest and most well-known archaeological sites, some of the oldest sites in the Lower Mainland, the Glenrose and St. Mungo Cannery sites, with dates 8,000 years before present, 9,000 years before present. So very significant archaeological sites, and they were being impacted in the name of transportation. Politics aside, it ended up being a really cool project filled with passionate archaeologists, and I figured if anyone is disturbing these archaeological remains, why shouldn't it be descendants from the local communities. So there were reps from 7 or 8 local communities, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Katzie, Kwantlen, and Tsawwassen. And we were all working together with these really knowledgeable people, professionals in their own field. And when I told them that I thought it was pretty cool and I kind of wanted to go to university, they changed the way they talked to me about things. And I applied and was accepted to SFU, and I started in the fall of 2012, and here I am. So, I mean, I guess capacity building at its finest is just the mandate of nations employing professionals like the best in their field, and then with the understanding that one day a community member will take their place. And all of my mentors in archaeology, especially the ones that work for Tsleil-Waututh Nation and our Treaty Lands and Resources Department, they've held me up at times where I was not excited to go to class, or they've helped me pick professors because everyone knows everyone in archaeology. And it'd be like, should I take this class with this person? But ultimately, I don't know. I think that I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I want to be a PhD student, even though grad school is terrifying and horrible some days. And I want to be a professor because I want the next generation of Indigenous academics to not have to look at faculty lists on universities. If I wanted to study with a brilliant Indigenous archaeologist, like a woman, I would have to go to DC or like the East Coast of the United States to study with a kind of supervisor that I'd really ideally like. So I want the next local archaeologist to not have to make those choices. That's how.
Thank you so much. Megan, please.
Hello, my name is Megan. I'm part of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation of northern Manitoba and descendant of the Vuntutquitchin of the Yukon. And my story began with my father. He was a victim of the 60s scoop, and it wasn't until he had started a family of his own when he was 35 that he found his family. And him and my mom spent a decade looking, and they finally found them in 1995. And my brother, myself, and my father were repatriated to the Opaskwayak Cree Nation Band. And that was a fundamental moment in my life, and it still continues to be something that I reflect upon. And just knowing that the past itself could be taken away so easily and hidden, and know you're close to finding who you are, you're close to finding answers, but it's just out of reach. You're not allowed to touch it, you're not allowed to know. That has also been a theme growing up, knowing and not knowing. And once I graduated high school, I didn't think, my grades weren't that good. I was like, oh, I'm never gonna go to university, I'm never gonna do this, I'm never gonna do that. And then I started at Douglas College, and I thought, why not? And I took an anthropology course run by an archaeologist, and I was like, whoa, you can do this? This is an option, right? And then it opened my doors, and then instead of saying, oh, I can't do that, I can't do this, I was like, well, why not? Why can't I? And I ended up transferring to SFU, where I pursued archaeology in its fullest, and I graduated there in 2016. And since then, I've been upgrading my skills at BCIT, seeing as how at BCIT they offer GIS, so a Geographic Information Systems program. And that takes knowledge and location and combines it, and it's multidisciplinary. You can use it in almost all aspects of life in your community and with archaeology, and that was the selling point for me. But I'm quickly realizing that the sky's the limit with it, and that's where I'm at now, and I can't wait to see where it takes me in the future.
Thank you. Tia.
Like Pwapwaida, Rensquest Tia Felix, Mahika Sheila Felix, Kia Jeannie Haskett, Masla'a Mervyn Felix, and Earl Joe. And so I just said, hello everyone, my name's Tia Felix. I'm the daughter of Sheila Felix. I'm the granddaughter of Jeannie Haskett and the granddaughter of also Mervyn Felix and Earl Joe. And I just wanted to say, Hayum Cooksjam, a big thank you to having me on Musqueam land. It's an honor, and it's an honor to speak to such a lovely crowd. So, as mentioned before, I'm currently just completing my 3rd year as a midwifery student at UBC. I am a strong Secwepemc woman, but raised in the south of Splatcheen. And there's a bit of a story to why I chose midwifery. I was raised by a single mom. I have 7 siblings, but not only was I raised by a single mom, I was raised by a community. And whether my mom was having a hard day, I would go see my aunties next door or see my uncles, and we would go hang out, do some hunting or fishing. And I was really kind of always that kid visiting every opportunity I could, and it's still like my favorite thing to do when I go back home. So I originally attended UBCO in the Okanagan, and I had a BSc. I did some classes in biology and environmental science, and I started working for Title and Rights within my community. And it was there that I was able to look at the files, look at our lands, our teachings, get to spend time with our elders. I get to go explore our culture, and it was really kind of this Western, colonial institution education, but as well in the summer I would get to go home and have that more holistic education and getting back to my roots and the traditions. And then I originally went into a BSc to pursue pharmacy, and then I realized it's not for me. And my sister, she became pregnant in my 2nd year of university, and she ended up having a midwife in Kamloops, and she had a home birth, and it was so powerful. She was respected as a matriarch. She was able to give birth on our land. We were able to say our words in our language and welcome the baby. And that's what I wanted to do. And looking at all the powerful women in my life, I think it would be a great way to blend both the Western biomedical medicine, but as well as respecting and having space for our traditional knowledge. And so really like healthy moms, healthy babies, and seeing that community support all around that. And reclaiming our identity. And kind of like reflecting back, I was thinking, when was the last time I saw a primary health care provider be a person of color, let alone also be a person of color and be a woman? It's rare to come by, and it's not been easy because there are those barriers still in our current healthcare model and system. But it's really, I have these amazing practicums and placements, and I get to visit, I get to do home visits, and I guess I get to also speak our language and talk about the things that matter. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of my story. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Cooksjam.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. Yes, please, for sharing that. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly unaccomplished at this point. I myself have a number of questions, and I want to hear more, and I will open it up to hear questions from all of you. But I'm gonna take my right of being up here at the front to ask a few myself first. And there's a few that actually came out from what you were saying. A couple of pieces. One of them Tim, at first you were talking about advocacy, and a few of you have spoken about your role as youth and the importance of being a strong Aboriginal role model in whatever field it is you're pursuing, and having those strong Aboriginal role models. So in any of the fields you're pursuing, or any of the work that you're doing, why do you think that the youth voice is so important, and why do you think it's important that we hear from our youth on any of these aspects? And I'd open it to any of you that want to go. Tim, you look like you're ready to say something.
Well, I'd just like to add one quick thing there. I'm not Aboriginal. I'm not First Nation. I'm Tlaoquit. I'm from there. That's who I am. And our youth are our future. We have to make this a good place for them. Chew.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
I'm learning that there's not a lot of room in academia for opinions that don't fit with the Western educational framework. And I think that I want to be a professor, and I want to mentor Indigenous archaeologists in the future, because I think that every grad student deserves a supervisor who's understanding, basically, because my supervisor understands my position, but she'll never truly empathize, I think, for a lack of experience. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It definitely does. That's key. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I would have to echo Karen in the sense of, for future placements, for practicums, how am I able to choose practicum placements where I'm able to culturally identify as a safe learning space? And there are comments like where maybe my preceptor will say that she felt oppressed, and she is a person who is not of color, who has had quite a privileged life, and I just think it's a challenge to navigate, and I know sometimes they do have the best intention, but to have someone there to support you who can sympathize and or empathize would be even better, but it's rare to come by, to be in this Western model of education, and to have these things. So last year was a tough year. I had a brother who had an inflamed lumbar region, which in the spine. And in Victoria, they accused him as being a drug user and only seeking pain management for that reason, when actually the scan came back and he had spinal damage. And as well as just like a lot of, my mom is a single parent. I help financially support her. And just last winter was a bit of a tough year. But to have a person who understands that being an Indigenous woman is not an easy thing. We have not only our education to focus on, we have our family to focus on, we have our community to focus on, and to prioritize those things. So to juggle and balance all those things as a young person is a challenge. But I think one of the things I want to touch on is youth. There needs to be more experiences or opportunities for youth to have those safe spaces to be able to express their identity openly, and to have role models to look up to, because currently in the midwifery field, it's quite, there's not many Indigenous midwives. In BC, there's less than 10. I would be the 7th, so to find placements and to provide culturally safe care to our mothers and our families is very rare. And currently right now I'm advocating for Indigenous students to be placed at Indigenous placements. So one of the things that I was able to coordinate with UBC is that I be placed at Seabird Island Reserve, because that's where I feel like I need to be, as well it's giving back to the people that helped raise me, to the people that I want to help and serve in the future. and that's where I need to be.
I think it's just important for young people, people struggling, just to know that it's possible. From wherever you come from, whatever you decide, if you're bad at math and you want to pursue mathematics, it's possible. Like if you have a learning disability, but you want to graduate from university, it's possible. And you're not a write-off. Your dreams and your hopes and your wants matter. And I think that's important to instill when you're young, to get that self-doubt out, and then you can grow into who you're supposed to be.
Thank you. And I just want to take a moment here to thank all of our panelists for sharing what is obviously personal experiences and how meaningful it is and how much we appreciate it. You're leading me so perfectly down the path. It's wonderful. You've spoken about the importance and the difficulties that you've experienced and you've seen for others in the areas you're working and experience. And I think I know probably some of the answers to this question. You've mentioned the importance of mentors and role models and leadership professionals that are like you. But what else do you think? What from your perspectives could we do, either as people working in our communities, or for us as the Secretariat, or in any other role, to help eliminate some of the barriers, make the work easier for youth, and support youth who want to pursue their education or work in their community or achieve any of these goals?
Yeah, so it's great to be in a different territory, and it's lovely. But currently, UBC Vancouver is the only place that offers the midwifery program. So it's far from home. It's about 6 hours. I have to drive to Coquihalla, so I need a stable car and to travel back and forth because I'm quite involved in my community and family. But I do have to commit to living in Vancouver because that's where my practicums are. It's a bit challenging for financial reasons because Vancouver is not cheap on a student budget, and also having to care for a family of 7. But we're doing it. And so I think, though, one of the things that I always look forward to is at the end of my practicums or my placements or wherever I am, I always know that I have a home to return to, and that's at Splatcheen. And currently I either work for the education department or the title and rights department for my band. But because of funding reasons, in our health department, because midwifery is directly related to health, that I don't have there's not enough funding to support a summer student or to have that opportunity available. So I think to ensure that when we do choose to return home, that there's opportunities there for us, because often what I'm doing in the summer is saving up for my next school year. And so, yes.
Thank you. Tim, thank you.
When we talk about breaking down all these barriers for our youth, we have to stop thinking about all these policies that we have. We have to start thinking about our youth and our people. And we have all these policies stopping youth and people from getting what they want, taking their language, taking all these things that our youth want. We have all these policies around it so they can't. We have to stop thinking about those policies and start thinking about our people. Shoot.
I'm going to echo Tia about the funding. I have had the privilege of being a sponsored student, so my First Nation has prioritized my education as a mature student, or somehow I made it through the running, but there's definitely, it's always a squeeze. It's like a lottery applying every year for the next year of funding on if there's going to be enough. And I don't demonize the people who work in the departments. Like, I don't envy their position at all, and I know that the rates have not been raised in decades. But the cost of living in Vancouver is high, and I currently don't live in my community because there's a shortage of housing. I live in UBC family residence. I have 2 small children, and I've been birth nerding out with her. I'm her new biggest fan. I think Tia's amazing. I just delivered with midwives, so that's another story. So basically, I think that funding opportunities and summer placements as well. I've had the privilege to work for Treaty Lands and Resources as a referrals analyst. Not everything is archaeological related, but I get to write strongly worded letters, and sometimes they talk about archaeology. So it's nice to know that there is a department with a need that I meet. I don't know where I'll work when I graduate. I can hold a permit with a master's degree in archaeology, so I could be an asset to my nation in that regard, but I don't know if there will be room when I graduate. So I guess I'm not sure where I was going with that. Funding opportunities and support. I appreciate the leadership in my community because everyone is really human, and they ask me how school is going even when they don't really want to know the answer. And they're just approachable. So it's like, oh, it's a 2-hour bus ride from your house to the community. But here are these events that you could come to if you feel up to it, or dragging 2 tiny humans across the city on public transit. I'm a little bit jealous because I get to miss things like language nights and community gatherings. But and other times it's people offering me rides home, or someone with a car seat is like, oh, I can drive you to the bus loop. So I guess it's just humanity and acknowledging that, like, if you're sending youth away to school, check in with them, or social media. Hey, how's it going? I think that I know that a lot of some people are not receptive to technology, but I appreciate like our community Facebook groups and stuff like that, or tweeting at my cousins, because it makes me feel like I'm home.
Thank you. Megan.
Just going off of what Karen says, because I'm displaced. My community is from Manitoba, but they actually have started doing technology stuff, like council meetings are live streamed on Facebook, and our vice chief does live streaming. She does challenges to the community. She does fitness days, and it's wonderful what you can use what you can do with the applications applied correctly. I think it's really cool, and like I'm a time zone away. I'm how many hours away, but if they're live streaming on Facebook, I can go in there and I can watch, and even during elections, when vice chief and council are going through, I know I put my vote in through the mail, and I can watch the tallies as they happen. I can celebrate with my family as they're recording it, and that's so special.
Thank you. We may be recruiting for some social media support in the near future. I have about 8 more questions I could pepper off right now, but I'm going to take up all the time if I do that. So I'm going to turn it to the audience. If you have a question that you'd like to ask the panel where you're here, please put your hand up, and Selena, who does everything for us, will come over with a mic for you. Don't be shy. Oh, I see 2 over on that side. They're going to make you walk, Selena. Sorry, way in the far back.
Oh, thank you. A great job, students. You've done well, and keep up the great work. You're way beyond, and it's great to see. I just want to know, I know Tia really well. I think it's really important to let people know what it's like when you do go back home. How do people treat you in the community? Because that's a really important piece of anyone's health and wellness when you go back home, or the lack of, how is that?
Go ahead, Tia.
That's a good question. So I've been in school for 7 years. In high school, I was a straight A student. I did quite well. However, there's this kind of unspoken air that I found. So when I went and pursued my BSc at UBCO, and I came back and I knew all these fancy science terms and tried to explain what I did in school, and it was kind of perceived as myself being a summa, and that's what we call a person who is white. And that was not my intention at all. And so what I've learned to do is when I go home, I make a big effort to go hang out with my elders, to go catch up with the youth. I do every Friday night drop-ins. We also do a canoe journey. So I do beading and sewing classes and language classes with the community, and like I'm not a stranger. So it's that perception of just because I am pursuing my education that I'm not better, or I'm just another community member at Splatcheen, and I'm really advocating for our women and our children and families. And so once I do get to explaining that part and how it ties into how it benefits not myself, but as well as everyone, then I find that there's more conversation, and just as well as like we can talk about anything. So whether it's catching up with the siblings, or learning our language, or spending time with family, or going to pick berries and fishing, I find that it's always rewarding. But initially it was misperceived as this barrier of, because I went out and branched out, it's hard to come back sometimes because someone had a baby and I'm like, what? I wasn't there. Or like, we have language class every Friday and they all learned this new word, and I'm like, oh, shucks. And so it's a really challenge to go back home and play catch up, but as well as to get ready for the next year of school. So, but again, it's making that extra step of visiting and catching up and not shying away both worlds.
I echo those sentiments. I was also like the smart kid, the resident smart kid. And I did live in the community when I attended school, elementary school and high school. But I moved off reserve quite soon after I graduated, and I moved out on my own. But I think one of the barriers to post-secondary education was the fact that I didn't know the language. I didn't understand credits and undergraduate degrees and graduate school, or what like a master's degree entailed. And my experience has been, I do try to stay humble. I've always, sometimes I'm jealous of people's traditional knowledge. I'm jealous of their language knowledge. So I can't imagine how they might feel about my post-secondary education. But insofar as being an asset to my community, as an example, this summer I was working in referrals, and I get this message, and it's from my cousin who's trying to pick his classes. He's starting an undergraduate degree at SFU, and he was like, I know you know these systems. And I had to ask my boss, I'm like, can my cousin just come down? He's up the street and he needs help registering. And she made the space for me to do that, and I felt like I was helping. So I think that it's just, I'm not going to push post-secondary education on all of my young cousins, but if they have questions, I try to be accessible.
Megan or Tia?
And I think you kind of hit it on the nail with like the speech and the learning you bring back, because I've been in situations where I've been speaking to my cousins and they'll say something, and then I think, well, what do you mean? How is this knowledge colonial knowledge? And then I have to stop myself and wait, this isn't what they're trying, that, how should I say, the structure that you learn at university shouldn't take priority over the Indigenous knowledge in the communities. And that's where, even though I'm so excited, I've learned all these things, I kind of have to take a pause and take a step back and be like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not appropriate right now. Maybe I should listen and I should start relearning again what's important. So that really resonates.
Tim, you had something to add?
Well, I live in my community, and the elders, all the elders there respect me. And when I need help learning my language, everyone helps me. Anyone who knows that they can, everyone does. And I really, really, really thank them for that. And before I came here, the Richard Monday, he's my elder, and I said I needed help. What should I say when I get there? And he says, speak from your heart. Say what you want to say. Say what comes from here, not what comes from up here. And everyone in my community respects me. Shoot.
Thank you. I think there was another question in the back of the room. Is that still there? Perfect.
First I would like to commend the young people who are succeeding, and my question is, did you encounter any funding problems with the system continuing your education? I think some of the problems young people face in this day and age is probably funding.
Well, I've encountered many problems with funding. Because of all the courses that I've taken are all university courses, and it's my age, I'm too young, I don't have grade 12. I need grade 12 to get certain fundings, and it just doesn't, my category doesn't fit. It seems strange that a 14-year-old kid is taking all these university courses, but funding is the main problem with all these things that happen with trying to learn my language.
And like Karen Metz just mentioned a little while ago, it's almost like there's a roster with funding. So for me, I'm off reserve and I'm a mature student. So the opportunities for funding for me now versus if I was on reserve and if I was just graduated high school are vastly different. It's almost like it's no fault, absolutely no fault. But I'm at the bottom of the pool, basically. And if they can give me funding, that's wonderful. But if they can't, that's just the reality of the situation. And I've been lucky enough to, early on in my university career, I did get funding. But then, however, that didn't last, and then I had to go on to student loans, and now I'm beginning the process again. So it is kind of a give and take, and they make it as fair as they can, but there is limited funds.
With such, there's so many things financially that comes across my table. As I said, I help my mom and I help take care of my 7 siblings and extended family, and so when I get being a midwife student and finding parking in Vancouver is not easy, and then especially births do not take 2 hours or less, including labor, and so I probably spend easily $400 on parking tickets and/or parking, and/or apps have made it easier. I can like extend parking for 30 more minutes depending on this placenta. You know, it's really challenging sometimes, but. Also within this program, like currently, for me to go shadow Indigenous midwives, I have to go to Hay River, if anyone knows where Hay River is, or Fort St. James, which is not a cheap trip. It's a flight and some travel, as well as gas money, as well as finding a place, renting a car. So a lot of the funding does fit like a specific criteria, as Timothy was mentioning, and sometimes you do not fit that criteria, and so it's a challenge in the sense of also like midwifery books and supplies. Like for a stethoscope, it's $300 for an adult one, and for a neonate one, it's $100, and but it's not sold at the UBC library store, so I have to find and juggle that, and like it's always added cost. And I think as a young Indigenous person, and then they'll ask questions like, oh, do you reside at home, and do you have dependents? And I can't claim those because those are my siblings. I do not live at home, but like there's all these kind of like cracks that easily you can fall into, but it's amazing because of the support that I do have from my community and from the education department specifically, that when things do arise, there's not a no, it's like, we'll see what we can do. And fortunately, I know that's not everyone's case, but one thing that really makes a difference, not only funding from my band, but the scholarships and bursaries, like I live off those, like they make an incredible difference. It's me being able to have and afford, I used to have a 1986 Jetta Volkswagen that 3 of the doors worked and there was a bee's nest in the left, and it made this wicked noise that you could hear from across the Walmart parking lot. But now with like scholarships and funding, I'm able to have a reliable vehicle that I can make up the Coquihalla to go visit family when needed, in those emergencies, in the summer. So I would not be here if it wasn't for scholarships and bursaries, as well as the support from my community. So.
I echo everyone's sentiments about funding especially, and I mentioned before that it's been a struggle. For me, I got pregnant with my first child in my first semester of my undergraduate degree, and then I was a single parent, and it took me an extra year to finish my undergrad, and I almost had no funding for the last year, but then somehow the education department ironed out the wrinkles, and I showed them that, you know, here I am graduating with a certificate and a minor and an honors thesis that I need this time and space to complete. So I'm grateful that they wiggled and found that extra funding for me. I will say that as a grad student, the pool of Indigenous applicants for grad student bursaries and scholarships is much smaller. So it's a little bit less competitive. And I'm fortunate to have received like a funding package from UBC to complete my degree there, which is a thing that I wasn't really prepared for. I didn't think that they would be like, here's some money, come study with us. I was told it was a thing that happened, but I didn't really believe it. So that was a nice surprise. But it's not like that for undergraduate degrees.
Also, I would like just to echo on to Karen's point is, when applying, there for many programs, there's an emphasis on admission rates, but there's very little focus on attrition rates, and that's unfortunate because we sometimes can't complete our education because of funding reasons and for anything else that comes up across our agenda. But I think there should also be supports throughout post-secondary other than just funding. For youth pursuing education outside of their community, because sometimes it gets missed. And like currently in the midwifery program, although there's 2 seats for every cohort, maybe 1 Indigenous student gets in. And being one of the few Indigenous students that gets in, because it's a highly competitive program, the focus is on admission rates, but to support an Indigenous student through a very Western medical model institution, it's very challenging. So I have met previous Indigenous students or students of color, and the program was a struggle because there was not enough supports throughout, whether it's financially or mentally or socially, for students of color as well as Indigenous students. So also supporting students, not just at the beginning, but making sure that they can cross the stage.
Thank you. So we are almost out of time. I'm going to ask you, I hate to say this, but if you can briefly think about this. I'm very curious to know if we put the 4 of you in charge, which I'm seriously considering advocating for right now, and you could design your community looking forwards 20 years when your kids are pursuing post-secondary education, what would that look like to you? I've stumped them. I didn't think it was possible.
I would want it to be prosperous and a safe place for not only the nation, but the surrounding communities as well. I mentioned before, OCN, the Pusquet Cree Nation, is about 6 hours outside of Winnipeg or Saskatoon, and there's a lot of smaller communities around that one as well. And I think making a closer hub that deals with Indigenous mental health, Indigenous health, and everything that we would need as a people would be just unbelievable. And I know based on some band council meetings, that's slowly becoming the goal on OCN. And I think that would just be phenomenal with the healthcare on the res side instead of having to go to the township, and just that accessibility would be amazing, and the growth.
As a parent, I have some thoughts of what I would like my children's future to look like. And I think for me, ultimately, I want to raise them to believe that they could do anything. And I think that my dream community would offer career exploration from a very small, young age. I was always encouraged to go out and try things. I've done so many things. I thought I wanted to be a bookkeeper, but then I realized that 60 hours a week behind a desk wasn't really for me. And having random opportunities to do things and just saying yes, not saying no, that's a little bit scary. I think that you only find your passion by trying a whole bunch of things, unless you already know. If you're born knowing, then that's fine. But when I found archaeology, I didn't have a passion. I was a barista at Starbucks. I made really good chit chat and excellent lattes, but I didn't have drive and passion to be more. And I think by saying yes to those random opportunities, that's the only way you're going to get a taste of all the things that are possible.
Others?
If I was to look at something in the future so I asked my mom, she wished me a happy birthday this morning, and then I was like, Mom, I have a question. There's this question saying what do I see in 20 years for our community? And I'm like, that's a big question. How do I even start? And she's like, well, Tia, you're brilliant, and you always tend to overthink things, and just speak from your heart. And she's like, well, what do you see for your siblings 20 years from now? What do you see for your godson? What do you see for your nieces and nephews? What do you see for me even? If I grow to be an elder, what do you see? And so I thought that was my mom, always a big heart. Well, she has to have a big heart because she has 7 kids. We all have to share it. But what I see is currently, if I was to dissect it into an education, I think one of the challenges that I come across is, for some reason, and I can't get my mind around this, is why is our traditional knowledge of lesser value or less heard than the current system that we see and hear and learn about in these institutions? So in my future, for my future children, I hope that they learn our language beside the language in the textbooks that they're reading about. And I hope that there's collaboration, one talking about, it's that motto, nothing about us without us. And so if it's learning about our history in Canada, I think there should be someone who does identify as Indigenous and can speak about that, rather than a 10-minute lecture on it started here, it ended there, and it was run by the church. And I was like, well, there's much more than that. And so I really see collaborative work at different levels, whether it's at the university level, whether it's within our community and elders, and in our own language. And again, just creating that safe space to learn, no matter what your background is, what skills you have. I still think that there should be more collaboration amongst each other, because right now it's quite fractured. And so I hope for that in the future.
Tim, do you have anything to add, or does anyone else?
The one thing that I would really like to see for my community in the future is more language for everyone. And if anyone wants to learn it, they should be able to. Anyone. Doesn't matter if you're First Nation or not. If you really want to learn the language, you should be allowed to. Shoot.
Okay, so we are out of time. Sure, but you're keeping people from lunch. I'm teasing. Please go ahead. No. Please go ahead.
All right, my question would be, I was at the joint gathering earlier, and I heard Tim, and I'm hearing all you guys. And my question is, I talked with Ed John, with First Nations Summit, and all these other important people. I said, we need to have heroes. So you guys seem to be like heroes, so do you guys know any heroes that we should be aware of?
Good question.
The one hero that I always think of is my mum. She's the one who always brings me here and helps me and guides me on the right path. Shoot.
I think my hero would be my auntie Jennifer. Is actually acting as vice chief on in my community right now, and she was scared to take on the responsibility that would come with that position, but she did it anyway, and she's done a phenomenal job. And just watching her fight for her morals, what she needs to see done in the community, and going, wow, that's my aunt. Like, I think that's awesome. I think she would be my hero.
I just want to do a shout out to all the amazing matriarchs out there fighting for Indigenous women rights. People that come to mind are, there's this amazing Indigenous midwife named Evelyn George. She's married into the Silts community in the Okanagan, and she's Anishinaabe, and she's making headway and advocating for cultural competency within our healthcare model. And I think if we are going to give birth, we should have the right to feel safe. And so I do a shout out to that, as well as to my aunties and of course my mama. And actually, my great grandma had 18 kids, and I was raised a lot with my uncles. And so I also just want to give a shout out to my community, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here every step of the way. And so thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad I let you ask that question. Thank you so much. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to our panelists, to all of you for asking questions and listening. And I think we owe them a huge round of applause. And from the bottom of my heart, best of luck with everything you're doing. You're wonderful heroes to all of us. So thank you so much. And we have a very, very small token of our appreciation for each of you. And for everyone else, I believe we have lunch, although I'm not sure exactly how that works. Okay, I'm told lunch is in the same room as coffee and tea. And I think we are coming back at 1 o'clock. So enjoy your break. And to all of you, thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, Tim has graciously offered to give us a prayer before we eat, so I'll turn the mic over to him. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you very much for allowing me to do this. I didn't say it earlier, but I would really like to thank the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations for allowing us to gather here today. I'm going to do a prayer today for this food, and so let's go. Ha inchi atlintla suwa hatwit hupi in hua takshi sapin takshi ukwapin tashi tlako nas atikshiklin suwa hatwit hupi in hua takshi sapin takshi ukwapin tashi tlako nas true.